The morning sun shone through the windows of the Thompson mansion. Ethan Thompson stood in front of his bedroom mirror, fixing his expensive silk tie. At 32 years old, he had everything a man could want. He ran one of the biggest tech companies in America, and today he was going to marry Olivia Rothschild, the woman everyone said was perfect for him. "The guests are starting to arrive," Jake Matthews said, walking into the room. Jake had been Ethan's best friend since college and was going to be his best man today. Ethan looked at his reflection again. Something didn't feel right. Sure, Olivia was beautiful and came from a good family, but lately, all she seemed to care about was getting her picture in magazines. Ever since he'd become CEO, she'd spent more time planning parties than spending time with him. "I need some air," Ethan said, grabbing his car keys. "I'm going for a quick drive." Jake tried to stop him. "Come on, man. The wedding starts in an hour," but Ethan was already heading for his red Ferrari. The winding road leading to the mansion had always helped him clear his head. The ocean breeze felt good on his face as he drove, thinking about the big step he was about to take. That's when it happened. A dog ran into the road. Ethan swerved to avoid it. The car spun out of control. There was a crash and everything went black. Sarah Miller pushed her cleaning cart through the hallways of St. Luke's Hospital like she did every day. At 28, she wasn't like the other hospital workers. She always took time to talk to the patients, even the ones who couldn't talk back. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her blue uniform was clean and pressed. The emergency. Doors burst open. Doctors and nurses rushed in with a patient on a stretcher. Sarah moved her cart out of the way, catching a glimpse of the unconscious man in the expensive suit. Within hours, the hospital was full of reporters and photographers. Everyone was talking about how Ethan Thompson, the billionaire who was supposed to get married that day, was fighting for his life. Sarah watched as important-looking people came and went. A beautiful woman in designer clothes showed up, crying loudly. She stayed for 15 minutes, just long enough for the photographers to get their pictures, then left. That night, when things quieted down, Sarah went in to clean Ethan's room. Looking at him lying there, she felt sorry for him. While she wiped down the tables, she started talking softly. "You picked quite a day to end up here, Mr. Thompson. But don't worry. Lots of people are hoping you'll get better." She had no idea those simple words would be the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The next few weeks showed Sarah exactly what kind of people surrounded Ethan Thompson. His fiancée, Olivia, only came when the reporters were around. She'd pose by his bed, pretending to be heartbroken, but she was always checking her phone and leaving as soon as the cameras were gone. "I have to go, darling," she'd say, barely touching his hand. "I have an important lunch meeting." Sarah started spending her breaks in Ethan's room. She'd bring books from the public library and read to him. She started with her favorite, The Little Prince. "They say people in comas can hear everything," she told him one night. "So I thought you might like some company." While Sarah was taking care of Ethan, his brother Alexander was busy taking over the company. He had an old paper giving him power of attorney, and he used it to call board meetings and make changes. "It's just until my brother gets better," he told everyone. But Sarah saw how he whispered with Michael Davis, Ethan's biggest business rival, in the hospital hallways. One night, Sarah overheard Olivia and Alexander arguing outside Ethan's room. "We need to speed things up," Olivia was saying. "People are starting to ask questions about the wedding." "Just wait a little longer," Alexander replied. "Soon we'll have control of everything, and you'll get what we agreed on." Sarah's heart sank. These people weren't waiting for Ethan to wake up. They were hoping he wouldn't. That night, she held Ethan's hand while she read to him. "You need to wake up," she whispered. "There are things happening that you need to know about." She felt his fingers move slightly in her hand. The heart monitor beeped a little. Faster. Sarah smiled, keeping this moment just between them. Outside, the newspapers were starting to forget about Ethan Thompson. But in that quiet hospital room, something real was growing. Something that had nothing to do with money or power, but everything to do with caring and being there for someone when they needed it most. Time passed slowly at St. Luke's Hospital. Sarah kept reading to Ethan every night, telling him about her day and what was happening in the world. She noticed how the flowers Olivia brought for the photographers always died quickly, so she started bringing fresh daisies from her mother's garden. "These aren't fancy roses," she told him one evening, "but at least they're real, like the people who really care about you." During the day, Sarah watched as Alexander Thompson made the hospital his new office. He'd arrive in expensive suits surrounded by lawyers carrying stacks of papers. They'd sit in Ethan's room for hours talking about the company like Ethan wasn't even there. "The board is getting restless," one lawyer said. "We need to make some permanent changes." Alexander nodded, looking at his unconscious brother. "Then, let's call another meeting. It's time to vote on the merger with Davis Industries." Sarah's stomach turned when she heard this. She remembered how Michael Davis, the owner of Davis Industries, had tried to take over Ethan's company just last year. Now his biggest rival was about to get everything he wanted, thanks to Ethan's own brother. One morning, Sarah was cleaning when she saw Olivia rushing into the hospital, looking upset. Instead of going to Ethan's room, she went straight to Alexander's. "Temporary office, have you seen this?" Olivia waved a magazine in Alexander's face. The cover showed her at a party in Miami, dancing with a young movie star. "The press is saying I'm moving on. This could ruin everything." Alexander grabbed her arm. "Keep your voice down. You're supposed to be the grieving fiancé, remember? Just stay away from parties for a while. In a few more weeks, none of this will matter." Sarah felt sick. These people were counting on Ethan never waking up. They were already dividing up his life like vultures. That night, Sarah sat closer to Ethan's bed than usual. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said softly, "but you're the only honest person in this room. Everyone else is wearing a mask, pretending to care while they steal everything from you." She noticed his heart monitor beeping faster, like it did sometimes when she talked to him. The doctors said it was just random activity, but Sarah believed differently. She believed Ethan was fighting to come back. Days turned into weeks. Sarah learned more about Ethan from the newspapers than from his family. He'd built his company from nothing, turning a small software firm into a tech giant. He gave money to children's hospitals and education programs. This was a man who cared about more than just making money. Meanwhile, Alexander was systematically dismantling everything Ethan had built. He fired loyal employees and replaced them with his own people. He cancelled the charitable programs Ethan had started. The company that had once been known for helping people was turning into something cold and greedy. Olivia's visits became shorter and less frequent. She'd rush in, take a few pictures with her sleeping fiancé for social media, then hurry off to lunch with her friends. But the gossip magazines kept catching her with different men, and people were starting to talk. "I can't keep this up much longer," she told Alexander one day. "People are calling me heartless for going to parties while he's in a coma. We need to end this soon." Alexander patted her hand. "Just a little longer. The merger vote is next week. After that, we can start talking about letting him go." Sarah's blood ran cold. Were they planning to turn off Ethan's life support? She looked at the man in the bed, so still and vulnerable. In the weeks she'd spent with him, she'd come to care about him in a way she couldn't explain. The idea of them hurting him made her want to scream. That night, she brought a new book to read, The Count of Monte Cristo. As she read about a man betrayed by those closest to him, she held Ethan's hand tightly. "Don't give up," she whispered. "There are still good people in the world. People who know right from wrong, people who would stand by you if you just opened your eyes." And then something amazing happened. Ethan's fingers twitched in her hand stronger than ever before. His eyelids fluttered. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. "Ethan," she whispered, hardly daring to hope. "Can you hear me?" The monitor started beeping faster. Sarah saw his eyes moving under his eyelids. She pressed the call button for the nurse, her hand trembling. "Come on, Ethan," she urged. "You can do this. Show them all that they underestimated you. Show them what kind of man you really are." As the night staff rushed in, Sarah stepped back, her heart pounding. Something was happening, something big, was about to change. And she had a feeling that all the lies and schemes were about to come crashing down. The doctors rushed around Ethan's bed, checking his vital signs and shining lights in his eyes. Sarah stood in the corner, her heart racing. As she watched, Dr. Roberts, the head neurologist, looked more excited than she'd ever seen him. "He's showing strong signs of emerging from the coma," he announced. "These are very encouraging signs." Sarah wanted to cry with joy, but she knew what this meant. Alexander and Olivia would be rushing back to the hospital as soon as they heard the news. All their plans were about to fall apart. Sure enough, within an hour, Alexander burst through the doors, still wearing his expensive suit from some late-night business meeting. He looked more worried than happy about his brother's condition. "What exactly is happening?" he demanded to know. Dr. Roberts explained that Ethan was showing increased brain activity and responding to stimuli. "He could wake up any day now," the doctor said. Alexander pulled out his phone immediately, stepping into the hallway. Sarah pretended to mop the floor nearby, listening carefully. "We need to move faster," Alexander was saying to someone. "The vote has to happen tomorrow. I don't care what time it is. Call everyone on the board right now." Sarah knew she had to do something. She might be just a cleaning lady, but she was the only one who knew the truth about what was happening. She went to the nurse's station and found Maria, the head nurse, who had always been kind to her. "Maria, I need your help," Sarah said. "There's something wrong happening with Mr. Thompson's company. His brother is trying to take everything before he wakes up." Maria listened carefully as Sarah explained everything she'd overheard. "You need to tell Dr. Roberts," Maria said finally. "As Mr. Thompson's doctor, he has a duty to protect his patient's interests." The next morning, Olivia finally showed up, wearing a designer dress and full makeup, ready for the cameras. But there weren't any photographers around this time. She found Alexander pacing in the hallway. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Why did you call me so early?" "He's waking up," Alexander snapped. "All our plans are falling apart." Sarah, who was changing the trash bags nearby, saw Olivia's face turn white. "But what about the merger? What about everything we planned?" "I'm calling an emergency board meeting for noon today. We have to push the vote through before he wakes up completely. Once the merger with Davis is approved, there's nothing he can do about it." Sarah had heard enough. She went straight to Dr. Roberts' office and told him everything she knew. The doctor listened carefully, his face growing more serious with each word. "This is very serious," he said. "We have a legal obligation to protect Mr. Thompson's interests while he's under our care. I'm calling the hospital's legal team right now." By midday, the hospital was in chaos. The board meeting was about to start at Thompson Enterprises when 2 police officers and a judge showed up with court orders. The hospital's lawyers had worked fast, getting an emergency injunction to stop any major company decisions until Ethan regained consciousness. Alexander was furious. He stormed into Ethan's room, where Sarah was changing the water for her daisies. "You!" he shouted, pointing at her. "This was your doing, wasn't it? You're just a cleaning lady. How dare you interfere in our business?" "Your business?" a weak voice said from the bed. Everyone froze. Ethan Thompson's eyes were open, and he was looking right at his brother. Sarah's heart almost stopped. After all these weeks of talking to him, reading to him, hoping he could hear her, he was finally awake, and the first thing he heard was his brother revealing his true colors. Ethan tried to sit up, but he was still weak. Sarah rushed to adjust his bed, helping him get comfortable. His eyes met hers, and there was something. In them, recognition, gratitude, something more that she couldn't name. "I know you," he said softly. "Your voice. You were here all along, weren't you?" Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Thompson. I've been here." "Ethan," he corrected her. "Please call me Ethan." He turned to his brother, his voice stronger. "Now. And you—" "I heard everything. Every plan, every scheme, every betrayal, I heard it all." Alexander's face turned pale. "You don't understand. The company needed strong leadership while you were—" "While I was what?" Ethan interrupted. "Lying here helpless while you tried to steal everything I built? While you plotted with Michael Davis to destroy my life's work?" Just then, Olivia burst into the room, stopping short when she saw Ethan awake. "Darling," she exclaimed, trying to rush to his side. "I've been so worried." "Save it," Ethan said coldly. "I heard you too. All those photo shoots pretending to be the grieving fiancé, while you were planning to take your share of my company. I heard every word." Dr. Roberts stepped into the room with 2 police officers. "Mr. Thompson," he said, These officers would like to talk to your brother about some suspicious financial transactions that have come to light." As Alexander was led away, protesting loudly, Ethan reached for Sarah's hand. She took it automatically, the gesture feeling natural after all the time she'd held his hand while reading to him. "Thank you," he said simply. "For being real, for being here, for caring enough to fight for me." Sarah smiled through her tears. "I just did what any decent person would do." "No," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "You did so much more than that. You gave me something to fight for, something worth waking up for." Outside the room, reporters were gathering as news of Ethan Thompson's recovery spread. But inside, in that quiet moment, something new was beginning. Something true and honest, born in the darkness of a coma and strengthened by betrayal. Something that proved that sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones you can buy, but the ones that come from a pure heart. The next few days at St. Luke's Hospital were a whirlwind of activity. News of Ethan Thompson's recovery was everywhere. Reporters camped outside, hoping to get the first pictures of the billionaire who had caught his own brother trying to steal his company. Ethan was getting stronger every day, but he still needed help with basic things. He refused to let any other nurse's aide help him except Sarah. "I trust her," he told Dr. Roberts firmly. "She's the only one who was here for me without wanting anything in return." Sarah tried to keep things professional, but it was hard when Ethan looked at her the way he did. Every time she helped him sit up or brought him water, his hand would linger on hers a moment too long. "Tell me about the books you read to me," he said one afternoon. "I remember your voice, but the stories are all mixed up in my head." Sarah sat in what had become her usual chair beside his bed. "Well, we started with The Little Prince." "Wait," Ethan interrupted, reaching for her hand. "I remember that one. You said it was your favorite because it taught you that what matters most can't be seen with the eyes." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "You really could hear me, every word," he said softly. "Your voice was like a light in the darkness. When everyone else was plotting and scheming, you just talked to me like a person, not a bank account." Meanwhile, the investigation into Alexander's actions was revealing more shocking details. The police found evidence that he had been working with Michael Davis for months before Ethan's accident. They had planned everything, taking control of the company, merging it with Davis Industries and selling off the parts that made Ethan's company special. Jake Matthews, Ethan's best friend and best man from the failed wedding, came to visit. He was horrified when he learned what had happened. "I should have been here more," Jake said, looking guilty. "But every time I came, Alexander said you were too unstable for visitors." He was keeping people away, Sarah explained as she adjusted Ethan's pillows. "Anyone who might have noticed what he was doing." Jake watched how Ethan's eyes followed Sarah around the room. He saw how his friend relaxed when she was near. After she left to get Ethan's lunch, Jake smiled. "So the cleaning lady, huh?" Ethan didn't pretend not to understand. "She's amazing, Jake. She risked her job to save my company. She spent hours reading to me, talking to me when everyone else had given up." "And it doesn't hurt that she's pretty," Jake teased. "She's beautiful," Ethan corrected, "inside and out." But not everyone was happy about Sarah's role in Ethan's recovery. Olivia showed up one day, trying one last time to explain herself. "Darling, you have to understand," she pleaded. "I was just trying to protect our future. Alexander said if I helped him, we could still have everything we planned." Ethan's face hardened. "Our future? You mean your future? The one where you got rich by helping steal everything I worked for?" "It wasn't like that," Olivia protested. She saw Sarah entering with fresh flowers, and her eyes narrowed. "Oh, I get it. You're falling for the help. How sweet. But do you really think someone like her could fit into your world?" "My world?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "My world was full of people like you and Alexander, people who only cared about money and power. Maybe it's time for my world to change." Sarah tried to leave quietly, but Ethan called her back. "Sarah, please stay. Mrs. Rothschild was just leaving." Olivia's face turned red. She grabbed her designer purse and stormed out, nearly running into Dr. Roberts. The doctor had good news. "Your recovery is remarkable, Mr. Thompson. We can start talking about releasing you soon." Sarah felt her heart sink. Once Ethan left the hospital, everything would change. He would go back to his mansion, his company, his real life. She would just be a memory of his time here. That night, as she was helping him get ready for bed, Ethan seemed quiet. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Are you in pain?" "No," he said, taking her hand. "I'm just thinking about leaving here, going back to my empty house, my complicated life." "You'll be fine," Sarah assured him. "You're strong. You survived everything they threw at you." "Because of you," he said. "Sarah, I don't want to go back to my old life. That life led me here, surrounded by fake people who only wanted my money. When I was in the coma, you talked to me about real things. Your mother's garden, your dreams of going back to school, the books you love. That's the kind of life I want." Sarah's heart was beating so fast she could hardly breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when I leave here, I don't want to leave you behind. I know it sounds crazy. We barely know each other. Or maybe we know each other better than most people ever do. I heard your heart in every word you spoke to me. I felt your kindness in every touch. But I'm just a cleaning lady," Sarah whispered, echoing Olivia's words. "No," Ethan said firmly. "You're the woman who saved my life, my company, and my soul. You're the woman who showed me what really matters. And if you'll let me, I want to spend every day proving that I deserve the faith you had in me." Outside the window, the city lights twinkled like stars. In that quiet hospital room, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times looked into each other's eyes and saw a future neither of them had expected. A future built not on money or power, but on something much more valuable: truth, trust, and a love that had grown in silence, waiting for its moment to bloom. The day Ethan was released from the hospital, reporters crowded the entrance. Everyone wanted to see the billionaire who had survived not only a terrible accident, but also his family's betrayal. Nobody paid attention to Sarah, who was finishing her shift and trying not to cry. "I'll send a car for you tonight," Ethan had told her that morning. "Have dinner with me at my house, please." Sarah had nodded, but her stomach was in knots. It was one thing to talk and grow close in the safety of the hospital. It was another thing entirely to step into Ethan's world. When she got home to her small apartment, there was a large box waiting at her door. Inside was a beautiful blue dress with a note, something special for a special evening. Ethan, Sarah's mother Rosa, helped her get ready. "Mihija," she said, fixing Sarah's hair. "I've never seen you like this. You're glowing." "I'm scared, Mama," Sarah admitted. "His world is so different from ours." "Love doesn't care about worlds," Rosa said wisely. "It only cares about hearts." The car that picked Sarah up was the fanciest she'd ever seen. The driver, an older man named Thomas, smiled kindly at her. "Mr. Thompson has been talking about you all day, miss," he said. "It's good to see him happy again." But when they arrived at the Thompson mansion, Sarah's nerves came rushing back. The house was enormous, with marble columns and perfect gardens. She felt so out of place. Ethan was waiting at the door. He was wearing a simple suit, but he looked more handsome than ever. When he saw Sarah, his face lit up. "You look beautiful," he said, taking her hand. "Come on, I have something to show you." He led her through the huge house to a cozy room filled with books. In the middle was a small table set for dinner, with candles and flowers. Daisies, just like the ones she used to bring him in the hospital. "I had the staff clear out for the evening," Ethan said. "I wanted it to be just us, like in the hospital. No servants, no pressure, just you and me." Sarah relaxed a little. "This room is amazing. It's my favorite place in the house," Ethan said. "And look what I have." He picked up a copy of The Little Prince. "I thought maybe you could read to me again for old time's sake." Just like that, the nervousness melted away. They ate dinner, talked, and laughed. Ethan told her about his first day back at the office. "The board members who supported Alexander are all resigning," he said. "They're scared I'll press charges, but I'm more interested in rebuilding than revenge." "That's why you're different from them," Sarah said. "You want to create things, not destroy them." Later, as they sat on the couch and Sarah read from The Little Prince, Ethan's phone kept buzzing. He ignored it until finally he couldn't anymore. "I'm sorry," he said, checking the messages. His face turned serious. "The police just arrested Michael Davis. He's telling them everything about his deal with Alexander." Sarah put the book down. Are you okay? I thought I'd feel better when they were caught, Ethan said. But I just feel sad. Alexander is my brother. How could he hate me so much? Sarah took his hand. Sometimes people get so focused on what they want that they forget what really matters. Like I did, Ethan admitted. Before the accident, all I cared about was making more money, being more successful. I was going to marry Olivia because she looked good in photos and came from the right family. I wasn't even happy. And now I know what matters, being real, being kind, having someone who stays with you not because of what you have, but because of who you are. He pulled Sarah closer, but just then, the doorbell rang. Thomas's voice came through the intercom. I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Eleanor Thompson is here. Your mother insists on seeing you. Sarah felt Ethan tense up. My mother? She's supposed to be in Europe. Should I go? Sarah asked quietly. No, Ethan said firmly. Please stay. It's time my family learned what really matters to me. Eleanor Thompson swept into the room like a queen. She was elegant, expensively dressed, and her face was tight with disapproval. Darling, I came as soon as I heard about Alexander. This is a disaster. What will people say? She stopped short when she saw Sarah. Who is this? Mother. This is Sarah Miller. She's the woman who saved my life and my company. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. The cleaning lady? The one the newspapers mentioned? Ethan, darling, it's wonderful that you're grateful, but you need to be careful about appearances. People are already talking. Let them talk, Ethan said, standing up. Sarah is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Don't be ridiculous, Eleanor snapped. I know you've been through a trauma, but you're a Thompson. You have responsibilities. What about Olivia? Olivia? Ethan laughed bitterly. The woman who helped Alexander try to steal my company. The woman who only visited me when there were cameras around. She made a mistake, Eleanor insisted. She comes from a good family. You can still fix this. I don't want to fix it, Ethan said. For the first time in my life, I don't need to fix anything. I'm exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with. Sarah stood up. Maybe I should give you two some privacy. No, Ethan said, taking her hand. Mother, you need to understand something. While I was in that coma, I could hear everything. I heard Olivia planning to take my money. I heard Alexander plotting to destroy everything I built. But I also heard Sarah. Every day she was there, reading to me, talking to me, believing in me. She risked her job to save my company, not because she wanted anything from me, but because it was the right thing to do. Eleanor looked at there, joined hands with horror. You can't be serious. A cleaning lady? What will the board say? What will our friends think? I don't care, Ethan said simply. I almost died, Mother. And in that hospital bed, I learned what really matters. It's not money or status or what people think. It's having someone who stands by you when you have nothing. Someone who sees your heart, not your bank account. Sarah squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. Eleanor looked between them, her face unreadable. You're making a huge mistake, she said finally. Don't expect me to support this insanity. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the marble floor. As soon as she was gone, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. I'm sorry, Ethan said, pulling her close. I should have warned you about her. Are you okay? Sarah asked. That couldn't have been easy. Ethan smiled, touching her face gently. I've never been better. For the first time in my life, I'm standing up for what I really want, and what I want is you, Sarah Miller, no matter what anyone says. Outside, a storm was brewing, but in that warm library, surrounded by books and candlelight, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times held on to something precious, a love that had grown from kindness, bloomed in adversity, and was strong enough to face whatever storms might come. The morning newspapers were full of pictures of Eleanor Thompson leaving Ethan's mansion in anger. The headlines screamed, Thompson heir in love with hospital cleaner, and mother disapproves of billionaire's new romance. Sarah saw the papers at the hospital where she still worked. She hadn't quit her job, despite Ethan's offers to take care of her. I need to stay who I am, she had told him. That's who you fell in love with. But things at the hospital were different now. Some of her co-workers were jealous, whispering behind her back. Others treated her like she was already rich, asking for favors and loans. Only Maria, the head nurse, treated her the same as always. "Don't let them bother you," Maria said, helping Sarah stock supplies. "They're just jealous because you found real love." That afternoon, Olivia showed up at the hospital. She wasn't there as a patient. She was there to see Sarah. "We need to talk," Olivia said, cornering Sarah in the supply room, woman to woman. Sarah stood her ground. "I have nothing to say to you." "Just listen," Olivia said. "You think you know Ethan, but you don't. You think this fairy tale will last? He'll get tired of showing off his charitable side and remember who he really is. A Thompson." "You're wrong," Sarah said firmly. "I know exactly who Ethan is. I was there when he had nothing, when all he had was his true self. That's the man I love," Olivia laughed coldly. "Love? Please. I've seen girls like you before, playing the sweet, innocent card, but we both know what you're really after." "No," Sarah corrected her. "You're thinking of yourself. Not everyone is as greedy as you are." Before Olivia could respond, they heard Ethan's voice. "What's going on here?" He stood in the doorway, looking angry. He had come to pick Sarah up for lunch and heard the whole thing. "Olivia," he said coldly, "if you ever come near Sarah again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you and Alexander planned, every detail. Do you understand?" Olivia's face went white. She grabbed her designer purse and rushed out. Sarah let out a shaky breath. "How do you deal with all this? The newspapers, the gossip, the angry ex-fiancés?" Ethan pulled her close. "None of it matters. The only thing that matters is us." But Sarah wasn't so sure. That evening, she went to visit her mother for advice. Rosa was in her small garden, tending to her beloved flowers. "Mama, everyone thinks I'm after Ethan's money. His mother hates me. The newspapers are making up stories. Maybe this is too complicated." Rosa stopped gardening and looked at her daughter. "Life is always complicated, Mihija. The only question that matters is, do you love him?" "With all my heart," Sarah answered without hesitation. "And does he love you?" "Yes," Sarah said, remembering how Ethan stood up to his mother, how he defended her against Olivia. "Then everything else is just noise," Rosa said wisely. "Like the wind in the trees. It makes a lot of sound, but it cannot move a strong house built on solid ground." Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor Thompson was meeting with her old friend Judge Harrison. They sat in an expensive restaurant, speaking in low voices. "It's worse than I thought," Eleanor was saying. "My son is throwing away everything for this. This cleaning woman. We have to do something." Judge Harrison nodded. "I might be able to help. Remember that case against Alexander? I could make sure certain evidence points to other people being involved. People close to Ethan during his coma." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "You mean we could make it look like Sarah was part of the conspiracy? It would be her word against Alexander's, and Alexander would say anything to reduce his sentence. But they didn't know that the waiter serving their table was Thomas, Ethan's loyal driver working undercover. He had followed Eleanor, suspecting she was up to something. He recorded every word on his phone. That night at Ethan's house, Sarah was helping him sort through old photos. She found one of him and Alexander as children, playing together and smiling. "You were so happy," she said softly. "We were," Ethan agreed. "I still don't understand when money became more important to him than family." Sarah's phone buzzed. Another message from a reporter wanting an interview. She ignored it. "Maybe we should go away for a while," Ethan suggested. "Just you and me. Somewhere quiet where nobody knows us." "Run away?" Sarah asked. "That's not like you." "No," Ethan admitted. "But I'm tired of seeing you hurt by all this. The gossip, the newspapers, my mother. Life will always have problems," Sarah said, remembering her mother's words. "But as long as we face them together, we'll be okay." Just then, Thomas burst in, out of breath. "Sir, Miss Sarah, you need to hear this right away." He played the recording from the restaurant. As they listened to Eleanor and Judge Harrison plotting, Sarah felt sick. They were going to try to send her to jail to keep her away from Ethan. Ethan's face was like thunder. "That's it. I'm done playing nice. Nobody threatens the woman I love." He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. "Get everyone together. Tomorrow morning, we're going to show my mother and Judge Harrison exactly what happens when they mess with the wrong people." Sarah watched him, worried. "Ethan, Don't let them turn you into someone you're not. Don't let anger win." He stopped and looked at her. Even now, facing a conspiracy against her, she was thinking about his soul, his goodness. "You're right," he said, taking her hand. "We'll fight them, but we'll do it the right way. With truth and justice, not revenge." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. In that quiet moment, Sarah and Ethan held each other, two hearts beating as one, facing a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. But they had something their enemies didn't understand, a love that had been forged in darkness, tested by betrayal, and emerged stronger than ever. A love that no amount of money or power could break. The next morning, Ethan's lawyer's office was buzzing with activity. Thomas's recording of Eleanor and Judge Harrison played over and over as legal. Experts took notes and planned their strategy. "This is serious," David Chen, Ethan's head lawyer, said. "A judge plotting to frame an innocent person? This could bring down a lot of powerful people." Sarah sat quietly, still wearing her hospital uniform. She had come straight from her morning shift. Ethan held her hand tightly as they listened to the plans. "We need to move fast," David continued. "Judge Harrison is scheduled to take over Alexander's case next week. If we don't stop him now, he could cause a lot of damage." Just then, Ethan's phone rang. It was the hospital's administration office. Sarah's heart sank as Ethan listened, his face getting darker by the second. "That was the hospital board," he said, after hanging up. "Someone sent them an anonymous letter claiming you stole medications while I was in the coma. They're suspending you pending an investigation." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. "But I would never." "Of course you wouldn't," Ethan said firmly. "This is my mother's doing. She's trying to destroy your reputation before we can expose her plans." David nodded grimly. "Classic tactic. Discredit the witness before they can testify." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "The hospital is my life. Those patients, they need me." "We'll fight this," Ethan promised. "Just like we'll fight everything else they throw at us." But Eleanor wasn't done with her attacks. That afternoon, a reporter from the city's biggest newspaper showed up at Rosa's house. He had bank statements showing large deposits made to Rosa's account right after Alexander started taking over the company. "Care to comment on why you received money from Thompson Enterprises while your daughter was taking care of Ethan Thompson?" the reporter asked. Rosa, confused and scared, called Sarah right away. When Sarah and Ethan arrived at the small house, they found Rosa in tears. "I never took any money," Rosa cried. "I would never do something like that." Ethan examined the bank statements. "These are fake," he said after a moment. "Good fakes, but fake. Look at the routing numbers, they're not even real." Sarah hugged her mother while Ethan called David. They needed to move faster. Eleanor was attacking not just Sarah now, but her family too. Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Judge Harrison was getting nervous. He had heard rumors that someone had recorded his conversation with Eleanor. He started making calls, trying to cover his tracks. But he was too late. David's team had already sent copies of the recording to the state's Judicial Review Board and the FBI. By that evening, news was breaking about a major corruption scandal involving a prominent judge. Eleanor saw the news at her country club. She was having dinner with some society friends when her phone started buzzing with warnings from her lawyers. The FBI wanted to question her about her conversation with Judge Harrison. In a panic, Eleanor rushed to Ethan's house. She found him and Sarah in the library, their special place. "Ethan, darling," Eleanor said, trying to sound calm. "We need to talk, alone. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Sarah," Ethan replied coldly. "This has gone too far," Eleanor pleaded. "I was only trying to protect you, to protect our family name, by trying to send an innocent woman to jail." Ethan stood up, angry. "By trying to destroy her reputation and her mother's. You don't understand what it means to be a Thompson," Eleanor cried. "We have standards to maintain, appearances to keep up." "No, Mother," Ethan said quietly. "You never understood what it really means to be a Thompson. Dad built this company from nothing because he believed in helping people, in doing good. Somewhere along the way, you and Alexander forgot that." Sarah stood up and took Ethan's hand. Eleanor watched the gesture with a mixture of anger and fear. "What do you want?" Eleanor asked finally. "I want you to stop," Ethan said. "Stop the attacks, stop the schemes. Let me live my life and love who I choose. And if I don't, then the FBI will get every piece of evidence we have, every fake document you created, every false accusation, every plot you made with Judge Harrison. Is that what you want? To see the Thompson name dragged through the mud because of your prejudice? Eleanor sank into a chair, suddenly looking old and tired. You would do that? To your own mother? You were going to send the woman I loved to jail, Ethan reminded her. What kind of mother does that to her son? Sarah stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, I know you don't like me. You think I'm not good enough for your son, but I love him. Not his money, not his name, just him. The man I got to know in that hospital room, the man who cares more about doing right than being rich. Can't that be enough? Eleanor looked at Sarah for a long moment. For the first time, she seemed to really see her, not as a cleaning lady, but as a person who loved her son enough to stand by him through everything. I remember when Ethan's father first started the company, Eleanor said quietly. We had nothing but dreams and determination. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what that felt like. To be young and in love, to believe that was enough. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I've become something horrible, haven't I? Ethan knelt beside his mother's chair. It's not too late to change, to remember what really matters. Eleanor wiped her eyes. The FBI, what will happen? That depends on you, Ethan said. Show them. You were trying to protect your family, that you realize you made mistakes. Help them prosecute Judge Harrison. He's the real criminal here. Sarah brought Eleanor a glass of water. The older woman took it with shaking hands. I don't deserve your kindness, she said to Sarah. Everyone deserves a chance to change, Sarah replied simply. As the night grew late, 3 people sat in that warm library, talking honestly for the first time. Outside, the world was still full of scandal and schemes, but in that room, something was healing. A family was remembering what it meant to love without conditions, to be rich in heart rather than just in money. And Sarah and Ethan held hands, knowing that they had faced another storm together and come out stronger. Their love, born in the quiet moments of a hospital room, had proved itself again, strong enough to change hearts, to overcome prejudice, to bring light to the darkest places. The next few weeks brought big changes to everyone's lives. Eleanor kept her word and cooperated with the FBI, helping them build their case against Judge Harrison. The hospital cleared Sarah of all accusations and offered her job back with an apology. But the biggest surprise came from Alexander. After hearing about his mother's change of heart, he asked to see Ethan and Sarah together. I want to confess everything, Alexander said from behind the prison visiting room glass. About the accident, about Michael Davis, about all of it. Sarah gasped. What do you mean about the accident? Alexander's face crumpled. It wasn't random. That dog that ran into the road, Michael Davis's men put it there. We knew Ethan took that road when he was stressed. We planned it all. Ethan gripped Sarah's hand so tight it almost hurt. You tried to kill me? No, Alexander protested. It wasn't supposed to be that bad. Just enough to delay the wedding, to give us time to take control of the company. But the car spun worse than we expected. Tears ran down Alexander's face. When I saw you in that hospital bed, I wanted to confess everything, but Michael said it was the perfect opportunity. He said no one would question us taking control while you were in a coma. Sarah felt sick. She remembered all those nights by Ethan's bed, praying he would wake up. All that time, his own brother had helped put him there. Why are you telling us this now? Ethan asked, his voice shaking. Because Mother was right. We lost our way. The Thompson name used to mean something good. Dad built the company to help people, not to make us rich. When I saw how Sarah loved you without caring about money, how she risked everything to save you, I realized how far I'd fallen. Ethan stood up. I need some air. Outside the prison, Sarah held him while he cried. All the pain and betrayal he'd been holding back finally came pouring out. He's my brother, Ethan kept saying. My own brother tried to kill me. Back at Ethan's house, they found Eleanor waiting. She took one look at their faces and knew something was wrong, Alexander confessed. Sarah explained quietly. About the accident. Eleanor's face went white. "No, he wouldn't." "He did," Ethan said. "And now I don't know how to feel. Part of me wants him to rot in jail forever. Part of me remembers the brother who used to protect me from bullies when we were kids." "Oh, my boys," Eleanor whispered. "What happened to our family?" That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how close she had come to losing Ethan before she even knew him. She got up and went to the library, where she found Ethan already sitting there looking at old family photos. "Remember when you read me The Little Prince?" he asked when she sat beside him. There was that part, about how the important things can only be seen with the heart. Sarah nodded. "I remember." "I've been thinking about forgiveness," Ethan continued. "Not because Alexander deserves it, but because holding on to anger and hate, it makes us more like them, like they were when they only cared about money and power." Sarah touched his face gently. "You have such a good heart. That's one of the reasons I love you." "Will you help me?" he asked. "Help me rebuild not just the company, but my family? Help me remember what the Thompson name really means?" "Always," Sarah promised. "But first, there's something I need to tell you." Ethan looked at her concerned. "What is it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been offered a scholarship. The hospital board, feeling guilty about suspending me, nominated me for a nursing program. Full scholarship, but it would mean going back to school full-time." "Sarah, that's wonderful," Ethan exclaimed. "It's your dream, but I'd have to quit my job," she said. "And with everything that's happening with your family and the company—" "Stop," Ethan said firmly. "You put your dreams on hold to take care of your mother after your father died. You worked so hard to help others. It's time for you to follow your dreams. You really think I can do it?" "I know you can. You're the strongest person I know." He kissed her softly. "Let me help you the way you helped me. Let me support your dreams the way you supported me when I had nothing." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "I love you so much." "I love you too, and I have an idea." Ethan's eyes lit up. The Thompson Foundation used to provide scholarships for medical training. Alexander shut it down. But what if we started it again? Not just for you, but for other people who dream of helping others. Sarah smiled through her tears. "That sounds perfect." As the night grew late, they sat together in their special place, surrounded by books and memories. They had faced so much: betrayal, scandal, family drama, but their love had only grown stronger. Outside, the city was quiet. Inside, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times planned their future. A future that would honor the past while building something new. A future based not on money or power, but on love, forgiveness, and the desire to help others. Eleanor, passing by the library door, saw them together and smiled. Finally, she understood what real wealth looked like. It wasn't in bank accounts or society parties. It was in the way her son looked at the woman who had saved him, in the plans they were making to help others, in the love that had transformed not just their lives, but everyone around them. Spring arrived in the city, bringing new beginnings for everyone. Sarah started her nursing program, throwing herself into her studies with the same dedication she had shown as a cleaning lady. Ethan focused on rebuilding his company, restoring the charitable programs that Alexander had cancelled. The Thompson Foundation's medical scholarship program was a huge success. When the press found out that Sarah had inspired it, the same newspapers that had once mocked her now praised her influence on one of the city's most powerful families. "Look at this," Sarah said one morning, showing Ethan a newspaper article. "They're calling me a modern Cinderella who changed a dynasty. What happened to gold-digging cleaning lady?" Ethan laughed and pulled her close. "They finally saw what... I've known all along that you're amazing, but not everything was perfect." Alexander's trial was approaching, and he had pleaded guilty to all charges. Michael Davis, facing his own trial, had turned on him, revealing even more details about their plot. "The sentencing is next week," Ethan told Sarah as they walked through the hospital where they first met. They still visited sometimes, bringing books to read to patients in comas. "They're saying he could get 15 years. Sarah squeezed his hand. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, I don't know. He's still my brother, but he almost killed me. If it wasn't for you, Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. If it wasn't for you, I would have lost everything. Not just my company, but my soul. Just then, they heard a familiar voice. Mr. Thompson, Miss Sarah? It was Maria, the head nurse who had helped Sarah during her time as a cleaning lady. She was pushing a wheelchair with a young patient. Maria! Sarah hugged her old friend. How are you? Good, but we miss you here. Maria looked at the young girl in the wheelchair. Lisa here just woke up from a coma last week. Her mother says someone was reading her The Little Prince every night. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She had started a program at the hospital where volunteers read to coma patients, just like she had read to Ethan. It helps, Lisa said shyly. Hearing the stories, it gives you something to come back to. Ethan watched Sarah talk with Lisa, his heart full of love. This was why he had fallen for her, her ability to take her own pain and turn it into something that helped others. That afternoon they visited Eleanor at her house. She had changed so much in the past months. The cold society lady was gone, replaced by a woman who was learning to care about things that really mattered. I've been thinking, Eleanor said as they had tea, about Alexander's sentencing next week. I want to speak to the judge. Mother, Ethan started, worried. Not to defend what he did, Eleanor explained quickly, but to ask for a chance at rehabilitation. The prison has a program where inmates teach business skills to young offenders. Alexander could do that. Use his knowledge to help others instead of hurting them. Sarah watched Ethan's face as he considered this. She knew he was thinking about forgiveness, about breaking the cycle of hatred and revenge. I'll support whatever. You decide, Sarah told him. But remember what you said about the Thompson name, about what it used to stand for. Ethan nodded slowly. Helping people, giving second chances. That night, they sat in their library, looking through old photos. Again, but this time they were making a special album. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, placing a picture of young Ethan and Alexander in the album. Yes, Ethan said firmly. Our children should know their family's whole story, the good and the bad. They should know about forgiveness and redemption. Sarah's hand froze over the album. Children? Ethan smiled and pulled a small box from his pocket. I was going to wait for a more romantic moment, but Sarah Miller, you saved my life in more ways than I can count. You showed me what real love looks like. You helped me forgive and heal. Will you marry me? The ring was simple and elegant, not flashy like the one he had given Olivia, but perfect for Sarah. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. As they kissed, Sarah thought about all the twists and turns that had brought them here. A car accident that turned out to be not so accidental. A coma that could have ended everything, but instead began something beautiful. A cleaning lady and a billionaire who found out that real wealth had nothing to do with money. Eleanor found them there later, Sarah wearing her new ring, both of them looking through the family album. Have you thought more about Alexander's sentencing? She asked Ethan. Ethan looked at Sarah, then at his mother. Yes, I'm going to ask the judge to consider the rehabilitation program. Not because Alexander deserves it, but because that's who we are, that's who we should be. Eleanor hugged them both, crying happy tears. Your father would be so proud, she told Ethan, not of the money or the company, but of the man you've become. The man Sarah helped you remember you could be. Outside, the spring evening was turning to night. Inside the warm library, surrounded by books and memories, a family was healing. A love story that began in the quiet of a hospital room was growing into something bigger. A story about forgiveness, about second chances, about remembering what really matters. And Sarah and Ethan held each other, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Their love had survived betrayal, scandal, and near death. It had changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. It had turned a story of greed and betrayal into a story of redemption and hope. 1 year later, the gardens of the Thompson estate were filled with white flowers again. But this time everything was different. Instead of expensive roses, there were daisies from Rosa's garden. Instead of society photographers, there were patients from St. Luke's Hospital. And instead of a marriage built on appearances, There was a love story that had touched everyone who knew it. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, her simple white dress perfect for the woman she was. Rosa helped adjust her veil, crying happy tears. "Mihia," she said, hugging her daughter. "You look like an angel." Maria, who was one of Sarah's bridesmaids, came in with a surprise. "Look who's here to see you." It was Lisa, the young girl they had met at the hospital. She wasn't in a wheelchair anymore. She walked in on her own, carrying a copy of The Little Prince. "I wanted to give you this," Lisa said, handing Sarah the book. "For good luck, like the luck you brought me when you started the reading program." Sarah hugged the girl tight. The reading program had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. Now every hospital in the city had volunteers reading to coma patients, giving them a light to follow home. Meanwhile, in another room, Ethan was getting ready with Jake, his best man again. But this time, there was no doubt in his heart, no need to drive away and think. "You look happier than I've ever seen you," Jake said. "I am," Ethan replied simply. "Everything makes sense now." There was a knock at the door. It was Eleanor, looking elegant but softer than she used to be. "Alexander sent this," she said, holding out a letter. "He wanted you to have it before the ceremony." Ethan took the letter. His brother had been in prison for 8 months now, teaching business classes to young offenders. His program was so successful that other prisons were copying it. "Dear Ethan," the letter read, "I know I can never fully make up for what I did, but every day I try to be more like the man you and Sarah showed me I could be. When I teach these kids, I tell them about choices, about how money and power mean nothing if you lose your soul. I tell them about my little brother, who learned to forgive even the unforgivable. And I tell them about the cleaning lady who taught our whole family what real wealth looks like. I wish I could be there today. Know that I'm thinking of you both. Love, Alexander." Ethan wiped tears from his eyes. Eleanor hugged him. "It's time," she said softly. "Your bride is waiting." The ceremony was everything they wanted it to be. Simple, real, full of love. Thomas, the driver who had helped expose Eleanor's plot and now ran the Thompson Foundation's scholarship program, sat in the front row crying. When Sarah walked down the aisle, Ethan felt his heart stop. She was so beautiful, so real, so completely herself. No designer dress or expensive jewelry could have made her more perfect. Their vows made everyone cry. They spoke about finding each other in darkness, about love that sees with the heart, about second chances and forgiveness and the real meaning of wealth. "You were my light when I was lost," Ethan said. "You showed me that true riches aren't in bank accounts, but in how much love you give away." "You saw me for who I was," Sarah replied. "Not my job or my background, but my heart. You taught me that fairy tales aren't about castles and riches, but about being brave enough to love completely." At the reception, held in the hospital's garden, where they first met, everyone celebrated not just a marriage, but a transformation. The Thompson name meant something different now. The company's biggest division was its charitable foundation. The board meetings focused on helping people, not just making money. Olivia came to the reception, humbled and changed. After the scandal, she had lost her society friends, her reputation, everything she thought mattered. She found herself volunteering at a homeless shelter, learning what Sarah had always known, that real joy comes from helping others. "I'm happy for you both," she told them honestly. "You showed me what I was missing." As the evening went on, Sarah and Ethan slipped away to their special place, the hospital room where their story began. Now it was part of the children's ward, its walls painted with scenes from The Little Prince. "Can you believe it?" Sarah asked, looking around. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I was bringing you daisies and reading to you here." "I remember every word," Ethan said, holding her close. "Even in the darkness, your voice gave me something to hold on to. Your kindness gave me something to believe in." They danced slowly in the quiet room, just like they had dreamed of doing all those nights when Sarah read to him. "I have a surprise for you," Sarah whispered. Taking his hand, she placed it on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Ethan's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Really? When did you find out?" "Yesterday. I wanted to wait until we were here to tell you where our story began." They held each other, crying and laughing, their hearts so full of love it felt like they might burst. Later, at the reception, they announced their news. Everyone celebrated again, Eleanor crying with happiness at the thought of becoming a grandmother. As the night grew late, Sarah and Ethan stood under the stars, surrounded by the people they loved. The hospital lights glowed behind them, a reminder of where they started. The future stretched ahead, full of promise. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked her husband. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Ethan replied. How one accident, one moment that seemed like the end of everything, turned out to be the beginning of something so beautiful. "Life is funny that way," Sarah said. "Sometimes the worst moments lead us to the best ones. Sometimes you have to get lost to find your way home." They danced under the stars, surrounded by daisies and love and the warmth of true family. Their story, which began in the quiet of a hospital room, had grown into something bigger than themselves. It had changed lives, healed hearts, taught people about forgiveness and second chances. And as they held each other close, they knew that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love and hope, with new life and new dreams, with the kind of wealth that can't be counted in dollars, but only in the hearts you touch and the lives you change. In the end, that's what real fairy tales are about. Not castles or riches or perfect endings, but the courage to love completely, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to know that the greatest treasures are the ones that money can't buy.